are here with Mr. Lee Fang, and I am so excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us, Lee. We are about to get into Epstein part 2, because Donald Trump just kind of dropped the ball yet again, or I don't want to say dropped the ball, he kind of like threw the hammer at his supporters again today, right? So we wanted to have you on, back with Janine Nunez. Lee, tell the audience a little bit about yourself. I'm pretty sure that pretty much everyone that follows us also follows you, but if not, give them a little bit background.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of both you guys. Janine and I have known each other for now, I think, 4 years. We started doing some of the stuff around the Missouri v. Biden litigation, around the Biden DHS censorship of social media, and that kind of rolled into other censorship issues. So way before any Israel-Palestine stuff, we've been kind of working together. And Mel, I'm a big fan of your Twitter account. I've been following it for a while. I love it. It's very combative and fun and informative. So it's good stuff.
I know. I hopped on. As soon as I hopped on, I was like, oh, I've been.
Yeah, you were in battle before the podcast, right?
I did. I am. I did have one drink at dinner. So usually I try not to drink and tweet too much, but every now and then I'll have one, and then I'll say something really spicy, and then the next day I'm like, probably shouldn't have been that rude. But
yeah, I try to maintain a red line there, but sometimes I overstep it. But yeah, I'm a journalist. I've worked in journalism my entire career since college, and kind of started blogging and writing for center-left publications, and I thought those were eventually kind of quit them and thought they were, too corrupt, too kind of centrist, and moved to the far left and wrote for progressive left media outlets like Vice and The Intercept, and worked there for a very long time, and then kind of realized that the far left is dogmatic and censorious in its own ways, in many ways. And now I'm independent. I've been independent for the last 3 or 4 years. I write for both center-right and center-left publications. I also have my own Substack. I kind of focus on investigative reporting, but I also share my opinion and write opinion columns sometimes as well.
No, you did great work. Your work all through COVID was just fantastic. I mean, your Substack, I followed. I get the emails, everything. I'm subscribed. So I just really love your pieces. They're always detailed, and your writing is so eloquent and actually really accessible, I think, to normal people as well, right? And so that's really important. So we wanted to have you on, and I thought that you had such a great post earlier. I'm going to pull it up real quick, about Epstein, right? So anybody, I'm sure everyone that's watching already knows that Donald Trump yet again came out, kind of threw his base under the bus, and said, basically, you're a weakling. That the Epstein files are
that it was like a left-wing political conspiracy, and you're an idiot if you continue to care about this issue.
And something I thought was really interesting is he has now tied these Epstein files to the Russiagate files. So I've had a couple dozen people in my mentions today say, I always thought Russiagate was a hoax, but now I'm not so sure. So I think that was a really stupid move on his part, on top of all the other stupid things he's done in the last couple weeks. But your post, and I'm gonna pull it up right now to share. There we go. Boom. You said we would have a lot more details about Epstein's political network if the JP Morgan U.S. Virgin Islands lawsuit continued. That litigation revealed how Epstein bribed exemptions from the sex offender list, paid off elites for tax exemptions, and law enforcement leniency, Epstein's emails with former Israeli prime ministers and Wall Street bankers, and much more. But the U.S. Virgin Islands governor fired the attorney general leading that lawsuit and rapidly settled the case. Who is the U.S. Virgin Islands Attorney General now? It's Gordon Rea, the attorney for the Epstein estate. Which is just like, what the? How is this even legal? Basically,
Well, I mean, we see this in other scandals, that there are often politically, when there's litigation that threatens to unearth damning secrets, or there's depositions taken, there's evidence that's compiled through subpoenas and other forms of document gathering. Janine can talk about this much more, but litigation tends to unearth all kinds of private secrets about civil litigation, and often unearths all kinds of very damning secrets. And when a government entity is involved, or really when anyone's involved, a settlement can just cut it off, and often there are political motivations there. And so, yeah, as I've referenced in that tweet, one of the biggest windows we've had, and I say we as people in the public, members of the public, into the Epstein political apparatus. How did he receive special exemption? After he was convicted in 2008 of child prostitution, how did he receive special waivers to continue bringing in young girls and young women to the Virgin Islands without complying with the sex offender registry? How did customs agents at the airport in the U.S. Virgin Islands, who reported seeing him with these young girls, not once report him to police? Why did he receive hundreds of millions of dollars in tax exemptions for a phony corporation that had basically no employees other than his political assistants and lawyers, but produced no commercial activity? Why was the Virgin Islands subsidizing this shell company from Epstein? There are all these weird mysteries that were solved in this J.P. Morgan U.S. Virgin Islands litigation, where a lot of these answers came out, and a lot of more damning emails came out with Jeffrey Epstein's personal emails and his assistants' emails to members of Congress, to the members of the U.S. Congress, as in U.S. representatives, their aides, the Virgin Islands government, a lot of his other kind of political allies. These started pouring out in the course of this litigation. And what did the governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands do? He fired the attorney general who first filed this case, Denise George, who was seen as kind of like a firebrand who was fighting on these issues. He eventually he settled the case the next year, so it kind of ended this outpouring of public information. J.P. Morgan had threatened that they had a lot more subpoenas to do, a lot more evidence to bring to that case. So, they said in writing that they were not done the investigation kind of portion of this litigation.
You're saying that the Virgin Islands said that they weren't done?
Well, the J.P. Morgan. I mean, sorry, just to give a little bit of background to this case. After Jeffrey Epstein's death, there was an effort to kind of recoup money for various victims. Right. So Denise George, then the Attorney General of the Virgin Islands, she filed a very aggressive lawsuit against the Epstein estate, won a huge settlement. She started suing other kind of actors who had helped facilitate or allegedly facilitate Epstein's criminal enterprise. And she eventually filed suit against J.P. Morgan because J.P. Morgan was the custodian of his various bank accounts. They were using those bank accounts to basically pay shell companies for some of these young and underage women. They were reimbursing them. They were paying their modeling agencies. It was used to facilitate a lot of the sex trafficking.
And real quick, just so people know, J.P. Morgan processed, and I believe it was a 12-year period, $1 billion in transactions for Jeffrey Epstein, who, again, 1 billion, okay, and it's funny because those numbers get thrown around a lot, but I think it's very difficult for most regular people, you and I, to grasp how much money that is, $1 billion in and out in 12 years. For a man that kind of
was a teacher at Dalton. It was like
he was a consultant. He was a consultant.
Yeah.
Is what his So yeah, that goes to what Lee is saying is that when the Virgin Islands sued him, it was on top of his victims suing. And what they were saying was basically there were red flags all over the place that you all ignored. And JP Morgan was like, here's our checkbook, give us a number.
Before they did that, what's interesting is that I talked to a number of politicians in the Virgin Islands, and I don't really have a sense of what the truth is here, but I do kind of, I think it is fair to say that the Virgin Islands bit off more than they could chew, because they did not expect JP Morgan's to basically countersue and say, no, you're calling us the facilitators of the Epstein criminal enterprise. Actually, it's you, the Virgin Islands. And they requested, thousands of records of, Epstein was paying the little Boys and Girls Club there. He was paying little, basically every civic association in the Virgin Islands, the baseball team, the volleyball team, the high school, whatever, the math tutoring. He was subsidizing it through his charity. He was putting all these politicians on his payroll. He put the former governor's wife on his payroll. He was giving out these bribes and campaign donations, and winning all this power within the Virgin Islands that basically made it his private island. And we talk about Little St. James Island, the island where he allegedly engaged in a lot of these sex crimes. Really, the entire Virgin Islands was his playground, because he had so much political control. He would, for every Thanksgiving, he would give out free turkeys to all the customs agents, the ones who were waving him through, when he was arriving with the young girls. So, this litigation was incredible, because on the Virgin Islands side, they accumulated so much evidence of his ties to Wall Street, of those bank transactions, of a lot of his high-level relationships with Ehud Barak and others that were being facilitated with JP Morgan. Les Stanley was CC'd on a lot of these emails. That's why they became part of the public record. And then JP Morgan countersued and then revealed all of these connections that Epstein had within the Virgin Islands. So then, I think it's really on both sides. Both sides said, okay, well, this is embarrassing for both parties. Let's settle it as quickly as possible. Let's fire that attorney general who keeps pushing to get the biggest settlement possible. Let's just kind of wrap this up as quickly as possible. So, it's a case where all the elites win from a big settlement, but the people lose, because there could have been a much bigger settlement. We could have got more answers about his criminal enterprise, but the suit went away in like 8 months.
That's really fast, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's so much more that could have come out. And one kind of addendum to the story is that they promised all of these. They got like almost $250 million from the various settlements, from the JP Morgan one, from the Epstein estate one, from another one. And sorry, my cat is meowing in the background.
No, it's okay.
They promised it to prevent future crimes like this for victims.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
For all kinds of like women's shelters. Well, then guess what? It's the U.S. Virgin Islands, a territory that's really racked with a history of corruption and graft and fiscal issues, to put it lightly. I've documented recently a lot of this money that was promised from the Epstein settlements to preventing another scandal like this. It's just going to random earmarks. It's going to the renovations of public buildings. It's going to pay backdated vendors and government employees' salaries. The settlement's gone, and then the money is just going to the bank.
It's incredible how fast this money, just tremendous amounts of money goes. Now, there's something that links the representative from the U.S. Virgin Islands to this case, right? And I don't know her name. She's a very pretty woman. I know that.
Stacy Plask, yeah.
Plask,
yes. And she's very sassy. Which
she's the one who wrote Taibbi a letter, I think, threatening him
she
with
was
criminal charges.
Taibbi's ass. I remember that. Yeah, and then I was so annoyed with her because she doesn't even have a vote, right? And yet she was so rude to him in that hearing. That's right. When I say sassy, I really meant rude.
We have so many answers about her from this litigation. She was forced to take a deposition. Before she worked in the first Bush administration, then she moved to the Virgin Islands.
I didn't know that.
She worked in she was a Republican. She, now she's an extreme partisan Democrat. She worked in the Economic Development Office. alongside the current governor, back when he was a low-level bureaucrat, Albert Bryan, they're the ones who signed off on this $300 million in tax subsidies to Epstein. She then goes to work for Erica Keller Halls. It's a local law firm in the Virgin Islands that is one of the closest law firms representing Epstein. They're the ones that push for his exemption to the sex offender laws. They're the ones that help lobby for lots of other special favors locally for him. Plaskett is literally working for Epstein's lawyer.
Wow.
Then you see in the emails that came out from the JP Morgan litigation, they're constantly picking winners in U.S. Virgin Island elections who would help further the Epstein kind of influence. And they're talking about like, hey, Stacy Plaskett, someone we like, someone who works with us. Let's donate money to her. So all of Epstein's associates and Epstein himself donates to Plaskett when she runs for Congress. She wins just by a few hundred votes. So I think it's fair to say that those extra donations probably made a difference. She gets into Congress, and then even after all of these kind of scandals have erupted, it's very well known who Epstein is and the kind of scandals around him. She travels to his New York mansion and ask him for money. They ask him to bundle money for the DCCC, which is the House congressional arm for House Democrats, the campaign arm. And even the DCCC won't take his money, but she keeps trying to raise money from him because their connection is so close. There's many emails back and forth between her assistant and Epstein's assistants. So, this is, from Bill Clinton and Bill Richardson and Chuck Schumer, received donations for Epstein. This is kind of coded the last few days as just a Trump Republican thing. But, Epstein was not particularly partisan. He was a very bipartisan in his influence peddling and in the elites that he kind of cultivated.
Yeah, I think that we see that across that's a theme, I think, across elites, right? They're not super partisan. They just want to control. They want to be in with the people who are in power. They don't actually care. And people who get it, they do get it, that it really is the Uni Party, and the Uni Party is ran by the elites, right? That's unfortunately, that's just the way it is. And so, yeah, I pulled up Plaskett. If you were a fan of the Twitter files, as I was, and you watched the hearings, Plaskett was extremely combative with Matt Taibbi in particular about basically she said that he was
she had sort of accused him
of being working for Musk, right? Like he was
she seized on some like minor mistake he made confusing CISA, an agency, with CIS, which was sort of an independent organization, and she claimed that he was basically fabricating his testimony, which was completely absurd, and then followed up after he testified with a letter threatening him with basically, not so subtly threatening him with imprisonment, which is crazy and pretty much unheard of. I mean, that's not something that happens on a regular basis.
Right.
I was pretty stunned by that.
Yeah, it's just astounding given how much people lie at congressional hearings. I mean, you hear it every day. Fact check any random kind of subcommittee hearing. You can spot lies or at least exaggerations and mistruths or miscitations. And Taibbi was not, he mixed them up, but like one agency gave money to the other nonprofit. They worked in tandem. So it's like, I'm not even sure if he was technically wrong. I think he meant the other one, but it didn't actually change the meaning of his statement.
Yeah.
Right. No, he was great in that. In fact, I've been a little disappointed with Matt. I'm not gonna lie. I just adored him prior to all of this, and I really wished he would have spoke out. And I get it. A lot of people have a lot of personal stuff going on, but I feel like this is like one of those like really strong, I feel like what's happening in Gaza is like, it's going to be a defining moment in our lives as far as what world politics goes. And I don't understand why these people who have shown so much bravery in other areas are just not saying anything. I'm sorry.
Well,
I went off there.
There's a big problem where, free speech there are a lot of fair weather supporters of free speech, and it's very rare to find people like you and Janine who are going to call it out on both sides.
I know, but he's so like he's so good. I'm telling you, like I've read all of his books. I adored them. Like and I used to be like this hyper partisan Republican, right? Like as a young, like growing up, and he changed my mind and like brought me so much, like opened my worldview to like so many things and showed me so much of the other side that it's so like what the man. Like how are you not showing that? I don't need you to be all free Palestine from the river to the sea, but I need you to like stand up a little bit here, you know?
Yeah, and I suspect that, on the kind of big issues, like, all right, I'm sure your audience knows the history very well of the last 6 months, 7 months of, the student arrests for writing an op-ed or engaging in a protest around Israel or Palestine, to the IHRA imposed at Harvard University and many of these elite universities being defunded.
Columbia today, Columbia just did it today.
But even on like the social media side, which is kind of that was what galvanized people. That's what brought Janine and I close. That's what a lot of people, like Matt and like many others, kind of how they kind of got onto the free speech platform of talking about these issues. Social media censorship. It's really the same level and degree of social media censorship as the Biden years, as the COVID and the kind of 2020 election era. It's just on the Israel-Palestine issue. We just don't have a billionaire buying a social media platform and revealing it. But from the kind of anecdotal evidence we've seen, the kind of apparatus that we've seen now documented, that there are groups like Cyberwell, this group founded by Israeli intelligence officers, who are overtly saying, hey, we're the ones who are the trusted partner to TikTok. We're also advising Meta. We're telling them to take down any posts that, reported on the Hannibal Directive used on October 7th, or anyone who questioned the 40 babies killed on October 7th, that's anti-Semitism. Take that down. Basically,
shout out to Elon Musk for allowing all of those posts. He gets a lot of shit.
Twitter has been better.
Yeah.
But then we have these other social media platforms that have been horrible. People just simply, posting, Israeli, a Palestinian like hashtag or emoji. Their Instagram posts are disappearing. Their Facebook posts are disappearing. It's really the exact same problem that we saw during COVID, but not the same level of outrage from folks who talked about it during the Biden years.
And like DHS said that they were combing social media to decide who to admit into the country and who not. And, so the counter argument would be, well, you have no right as a non-citizen to come into the country. It's different. I mean, if you're a true believer in free speech, it shouldn't really matter. And it's also completely anathema to our, history and tradition that we wouldn't allow people in because they criticized a foreign country. There's a little bit of case law that supported not letting a communist in to give a speech, but it was a very narrow ruling, and the court actually said, we're really limiting this to the facts here, and the fact we think that communism poses a real threat and could overthrow our government. I mean, which of course is what they're saying, but the idea that because someone is pro-Palestine, they're like they pose a real threat to the United States is ridiculous. So I mean, people like Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger have also just called out non-government censorship, as they should, just from the tech companies. So falling back on, well, this isn't the government or these aren't citizens, I don't think really gets you out of the quagmire of the hypocrisy.
Well, one other thing that a lot of these newfound free speech warriors have done the last year or two is they've talked a lot about really kind of awful censorship in Germany, in Brazil, in the UK. There's no exception. It's like, well, there's one other country that's a Western ally, that's engaging in mass censorship.
Did you see the clip of Marco Rubio talking about how we need to make sure that we need to stop the censorship in Europe. We don't want an American student living abroad to write an op-ed and find themselves being deported. And like, are you? I think I was on Aaron Mate's show, and he was like, is he doing a bit? This is like literally exactly what you're doing. Just here.
Like, is he trolling us?
Yeah.
I feel like he's trolling us right now because I'm gonna lose my friggin' mind. Okay.
Yeah, I'm blown away. I feel like they're banking on the siloed information that we all receive. Like, you guys are plugged in. People who, who care about this issue, of course they know. But I think 80%, 90% of Americans don't know about Remeza Ozturk. They generally know that there's been suppression of some Palestinian speech, sure, but I don't think they know how bad it's been.
Yeah.
I think the problem is, and I'm sure you know this, Janine, I know I worked as paralegal for criminal defense. The thing that you run up against all the time is that deep down inside, and it's true, people do trust the government. They just do. Even the people who say they don't trust the government, they do deep down, because you kind of have to, right? Because the thought that the government could just accuse people, totally innocent people, of being terrorists, right? Just out of the blue, is really scary, right?
Yeah.
So we always intuitively think that deep down, if the government's going after them, there's a reason.
They must have done something wrong.
They must have done something wrong.
I mean, I actually genuinely don't think I do that. I think like 10% of people don't, but like most people, I think deep down do.
Sure.
And I actually think that for government or for society to function, you kind of actually do have to have a little bit of trust in your government,
sure,
right?
Yeah. You gotta have some deference on some level.
Yeah. So it's actually these things are in conflict with each other all the time, right? I've always thought kind of the presumption of innocence and the trust in government are actually mutually exclusive, right? Because you can't fully trust your government, or really even kind of mostly trust your government, and also believe that the people that they're bringing forward in front of you are innocent at the same time.
Sort of relatedly, there was a phenomenon. I took a law and psychology course a while back, and there's a phenomenon where people sort of tend to believe that victims deserved it because it's just too hard to believe that something really bad could happen to you. So I think that's also part of it.
I didn't smile at that. I did not even smile at my mother, or I shouldn't say my mother. My sister and I have, I don't want to call. It's this weird thing that happens, right? Where it's not that the person deserved it. It's always like people who think that you have control over all of the situations in your life, right? And it's weird because you kind of do have a lot of control. I would say like 90% control. It's this weird thing, but yeah. So sometimes, especially when you're talking to older people, when you say about, victims and whatnot, it's like, well, what did she do? What was she doing that led her to be in this situation? And, it's a struggle. And I think that if we're being honest with ourselves, that all of us can kind of see it from both sides at some point.
Well, I think there's also just this incredible privilege and luck we have as Americans. America surrounded by these oceans that could participate in all these world wars, but never get bombed, never get attacked. We haven't lived under foreign occupation like most of the countries in this world. We haven't lived in any kind of recent, truly violent political kind of upheaval. We had a period in the late 60s and 70s, but it's really small compared to what most countries experienced in the 20th century. And we've had really benevolent leaders. We've had a lot of presidents who could have exercised much more draconian efforts to silence their political opposition. The tools are there, and we've lucked out in the sense that, there's been some bad actors and some, I don't want to paint with a broad brush and say everything's been perfect, but we've been so lucky and fortunate that Democrat or Republican, we've had presidents that have honored our institutions and practices and not abused their power really to the extent possible, right? And we're now dealing with a situation where I think the administration is not going in the, authoritarian manner yet, but they're kind of poking and prodding and gesturing towards that direction. And it's not familiar to us. Like, I was talking to someone recently who had just come from a wedding in the Middle East, and it was with a bunch of Egyptians. And they were like, what, all these gifts to your leader and this pledges of loyalty, that's normal in our country, right? Like when you live in a country where you're supposed to constantly, if you want government contracts, if you want, deferrals of prosecution, if you want this 2-tier justice system, you have to constantly glorify the leader. You have to give them and their family gifts. You got to do all the stuff that to Americans we're not familiar with that, so we don't recognize it. But in a lot of parts of the world, they recognize it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's frustrating at the same time, but right now I feel like, especially with this Epstein stuff, it's so, I don't want to say cultish. I know hardcore Trump supporters in real life. I do. Like, I'm a Republican and I've grown up around, I've been a member of the GOP. I know these people, and they're not like they like Donald Trump a lot, and some of them even love Donald Trump, but they're not willing to let pedophiles off the hook.
Yeah,
like that's not a thing. Okay,
if Twitter's any indication.
No, they're not. Even my mom, who is not online at all whatsoever, right? She follows me on Twitter, and she sees my Twitter like once a week, right? And then my dad, who is super into history, and he loves military history and all of these things, never. I mean, my dad is hardcore, would never. I mean, he's string him up. He's straight up go with Sharia law. We're gonna string him up by the
right.
The cranes, right?
Yeah.
If you're a child, So it's when I see this stuff online, I'm like, what the is going on? This is weird. This is not MAGA. This is not any conservative I've ever met in my life. That's oh, well, just, trust the plan. And I've never met any of these people in real life.
Well, we've seen the president go back on his promises on a lot of issues in the last 6 months, but it usually works to kind of do this coordinated. Trump does a few truth social posts that kind of set the parameters of what you're allowed to support or what you're supposed to say. And then, his main influencers then echo it and, provide backup. And you saw that with H-1Bs right before the administration took power, where people were promised reform. And then Elon Musk, Trump said, no, actually we support H-1Bs. Everyone shut the fuck up. And it kind of worked.
Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I lost my check mark for a week over that. Okay.
Oh, you did too?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yes.
Do you see the New York Times story that a lot of these kind of right-wing influencers look like they got shadow banned for criticizing the H-1B thing, where their engagements suddenly dropped to 0 for 3 months?
So I had a conservative Inc. badge, right? And there's a lot of things that went into that as far as people being paid for stuff. I wasn't paid for anything, but I did have it, and I took the badge when they offered it to me because I was like, number one, I'm a conservative, and number two, it gives you a little bit of a boost, right, in your algorithm if you have one of these corporate badges. So I was like, sure, why not? And I was in the group chat, but I never participated. Janine can tell you, I literally am the worst in group chat. My family can tell you I am the worst. I ignore all group chats. And so anyways, but then when the H-1B thing popped off, I was super active, right? And I was in the group chat. I was like, what the is going on here? And all of a sudden, my check was stripped for over a week. And my engagement went to nothing. And I was contacted by multiple journalists, essentially accusing me of taking money for posts, of being in some sort of collusion against Trump for the H-1Bs. I had 4 different journalists contact me about this stuff. It was crazy, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, my check mark just comes back, and then my engagement goes back to normal. And it was like nothing ever happened.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So you definitely know about this dynamic.
Yeah.
But, this kind of like corralling of the base, it's mostly worked in the last 7 months. This is the first time it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
There's a rebellion among Trump supporters that, hey, pedophile secrets in government, that's our red line. It seems like a fair red line.
That's our red line.
And there's massive amounts of evidence. Like, you're not going to convince us with one social media post or 5.
The ones that Bill Clinton made the Epstein files, that Obama made them. Like, Epstein was arrested and died in prison under Bill Barr's watch, under the first Trump administration. Like, what are you talking about?
I want to make a point real here, because Janine and I talked on this on our last live, and we asked about what he was indicted for in 2019, right? So 2019, so I looked it up, and I'm going to share it with you guys just so you can see. I'm sure you already know, Lee, but not everybody knows. This right here, this is your 2019. You can see right here the 19 from the indictment. And this goes to 2005, 2002 to 2005. So.
Oh, I haven't seen this. That's interesting. That's very interesting.
Just for folks who don't know, and I read from, spurred by Michael Tracy's Compact Magazine article, in which he, basically just said this is all a hoax and everybody. I was very interested when he said that. So I went in. So just so people who don't know, in 2007, which stemmed over to 2008, Jeffrey Epstein actually worked at a deal with the U.S. Attorney's Office out of the Southern District of Florida, and then also with the state of Florida. So he pled guilty to state charges in the state of Florida for 1 count of solicitation of prostitution and 1 count of solicitation of prostitution of a minor, to attempt to prostitute a minor, right? So these are pretty serious allegations, but they are kind of like the low end of sex trafficking as far as allegations go. So he was sentenced to 18 months, which he served in a very weird way, in which he was allowed to go to work from 9 to 5, I believe it was, Monday through Friday, and then he just had to go back to jail at night, and then he went on the weekends, but then sometimes he got weekends suspended. If it was like work related, it was
like the most cush sentence human child prostitution.
Child, and we're joking and everything, but this was a 14-year-old girl, okay? 14. All right. So she was not 15. She was not 16, 17, 18. All right. This was a 14-year-old girl. All right. This is it's pretty disgusting, really, when you think about it. And we're, of course, not laughing. And I do laugh all the time at the absurdity, but it's disgusting. All right. So
one thing that your audience might find interesting that I reread today, I read a while back, but I took a look at today is, the Department of Justice did an inspector general report kind of reviewing the allegations that this was a sweetheart deal. And, I don't think most people wouldn't agree with most of their conclusions, but they lay out a lot of the evidence in a very comprehensive and concise way around some of the problems around this prosecution that, the Palm Beach police had talked to several girls that they actually realized that there were dozens of them. They were coming sometimes 2 and 3 times a day to his house. He was bringing girls in from high school who would give these $200 massages where sexual activity would take place of a variety of types. I don't need to mention them here. And, if he liked the girl, he would entice them. It was like a pyramid scheme where he would give them money to then recruit other young girls, often from their own high school. And he would interact. He would keep track of them. He would send roses to their high school performances to remind them of that he liked them. And he was really grooming these 14, 15, and 16-year-olds. And as the Palm Beach police started investigating this, he donated to the police department. He gave a charitable donation. He hired private investigators to tail the police and tail the FBI that began investigating these crimes. As the kind of local state's attorney, I don't know what you call it in that county, but the local prosecutor started assembling a case and doing a grand jury. He hired a lawyer from the main there's one person who basically who's known as a very aggressive sex crimes prosecutor in the state's attorney's office in that county. He hired her spouse's law firm to protect him, so he conflicted her out. He took her off the case by saying that's a conflict of interest. It's like a very mob type strategy. And then he brought in several assistant U.S. attorneys who focused on these sex crime deals, including folks with close ties to that U.S. attorney's office, in addition to Alan Dershowitz and like Ken Starr and all these kind of very famous defense attorneys.
Roy Black was the other one, right?
That's
right. Who and not that I think that Roy Black, but I've read both his books and I thought that they were very good, and he has done some very good. I know, right? Of course I have, right?
But yeah, I mean, like then finally when they are granted a warrant to go through his house, he's got all these security cameras. So, there's obviously records of who's coming in and out of his home, of all these children, of these young girls. And by the time they eventually get a warrant to do that, all the recordings of all the security cameras have vanished. All the records are gone. And they had done some type of legal maneuvering to essentially limit the case to just one or two girls. When the police, the prosecutors, everyone knew there were dozens of young girls that could have been part of this. And Dershowitz, it's quoted in this DOJ report, was intimidating the witnesses, saying, we're going to destroy the credibility of these young girls. You don't want to destroy their lives. They're so young. You know I'm going to destroy them if you bring them into this process.
God, he's such a
bag. There were probably other favors. When you hire, it becomes not even true litigation when you hire all these former DOJ people to negotiate the terms of a deal. It looks more like political lobbying there if you're just hiring people who used to work with the DOJ's office to get a sweetheart deal that's totally negotiated out of court. It's like, wait, what is this? This doesn't feel like a true carriage of a true delivery of justice. Like, this is not how the process is supposed to work.
No.
So what are I know you may not want to speculate, but I'm always a little reluctant to. But in case you're willing to, what is Trump's reason for trying to get people to just drop this?
I mean, I think it's Occam's razor here. It's stuff that's about him. He had such a close relationship with Epstein. It was supposedly one of his best friends. They partied together. There's this video, kind of that NBC video of them just really hanging out and treating each other like very close mutual friends. I think there's a lot of close associates. Trump, I think, knows that billionaires like Leon Black, there's a lot of damning information about them. And then there's the potential Israel side too, that there's, whether it's intelligence or just high level contacts with Israel's political leadership in the past, there's very embarrassing information there that even if there's no kind of, like, I'm sure people have seen the allegations that there's some kind of Mossad honeypot type thing, and Mossad has engaged in those types of activities in the past. I don't know. I don't want to speculate on that, but something about Israel seems likely. Not necessarily the most kind of,
What's the evidence that you're aware of, like the solid evidence for that connection?
Of Israel connections?
Yeah.
Well, just from the J.P. Morgan Virgin Island litigation, Jess Stanley, the former head of J.P. Morgan, or head of the wealth management side, I'm forgetting right now. There's many emails where they're talking about connections to, meet up with or get together with Ehud Barak. There's emails about getting in contact with Netanyahu. I mean, it's like, okay, this person who's convicted of a child prostitution who has no legitimate business. Why are there so many emails about connecting with Israeli prime ministers or former prime ministers? Who else has these connections? It's very unusual.
It is. And I wanted to bring up, like I pulled up, you guys saw the 2009 indictment, or excuse me, 2019 indictment, which only brought up charges from 2005 to 2002 to 2005. Okay, as if like everything just stopped.
Yeah, I did. That's so strange.
Wait, a 2019 indictment?
The 2019, yes, I will share
again. That seems like the statute of limitations would have passed.
Nope,
but...
because they changed the law. Oh. So, and this is actually specifically part of Maxwell's defense. Actually, is the statute? Yeah. So right here, this is 2019. You can see, and this is in particular from at least 2002 up to and including in at least or about 2005, right? So they once again kept this in a very, very tight. And remember, Jenny and you and I were talking about this the other day, that I was curious if the 2019 indictment included 2008, or if it was like overlap. And from what I can tell, from what I've read, it's actually, I don't want to say exactly, but it's pretty much the same thing. So what that tells you from the 2019 indictment is actually DOJ set it up to fail from the get-go. I'm saying that. This is me. This is not Lee Fang. This is not Jenny. This is Melissa Whitty saying this, okay?
No, it's interesting, Melissa. I think you should explore that more.
Yeah.
Like, maybe they've explained it in the past. I haven't seen it, but I wonder if there is an explanation, because that is weird.
Because the just so people know, the NPA, there's a non-prosecution agreement that was put into place in 2008 by the Southern District, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. And what that said, is that they will not charge Jeffrey Epstein or any of his named or unnamed, very key on unnamed, affiliates or associates for these other crimes, right? That occurred from 2000 until 2005. So we have a 5-year period, right? And in that plea deal, they listed 4 people. But the key part is the unnamed. So what Ghislaine Maxwell, in her appeal, which is now pending before the Supreme Court, is now alleging is that she was included in that non-prosecution agreement. Okay? Yeah. Because even though she wasn't named in the non-prosecution agreement,
it's like she was thing.
Right. It was blanket. And what's very interesting is that the Second District ruled not that, no, bitch, you're not part of this crowd. That's not what they ruled. What they ruled was that you're not covered because it was the Southern District of New York who charged you, not the Southern District of Florida. Okay? Which is, in my opinion, extremely problematic, right? Because if you make a deal, because what they're kind of saying is that, yeah, you're covered if it was the Southern District of Florida who charged you, but because it was New York, you're not. I think that's problematic, right? Because I feel
very clumsy.
Yeah. Sometimes courts just come up with excuses. Also, just it was the Second Circuit. That's the sort of area that covers New York, Connecticut, etc. Just to clarify for anyone who cares about the legal part, but it's really, I don't know. I've never seen unnamed co-conspirators like covered by a plea deal.
I was losing my mind in my text with Jenny.
It might have been, sometimes courts they try to find ways around things. They're like, well, I don't really like this, but I can't. So they might have been reluctant to try to override the plea deal on its face because that, carries its own problems, but they might have thought this was the way to circumvent it. But of course, if, someone can't rely on a plea deal, that's a problem. So
well,
all sorts of problems.
But then it's like, okay, well then who qualifies as an associate and who doesn't, right? Because I feel like if you're not named in the plea deal, you shouldn't qualify. I feel
that's
like that's
very strange. I've never heard of it in my life.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to say there's never been a case, but I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating aspect of this because if you wrote in the plane once, are you an associate?
Are you an associate? Right. Yeah. Are you a co-conspirator? And again, so Ghislaine Maxwell is claiming that she is a co-conspirator, and ergo she is covered by this NPA that was signed in the Southern District of Florida in 2008. And again, so what I just pulled up was 2019 indictment, which again only covered 2002 to 2005, which I thought was so, because exactly, again, what you just said, Lee, was that after he was a convicted sex offender, he's still flying in girls. So that's why is the federal government not charging him with those things that are totally outside of this plea deal, so that he doesn't actually have any kind of defense, essentially, right? Why did they still stick to these 2002 to 2005? What is it about this very specific timeline that the government is so committed to? And that makes me not trust anything that is involved, any person that is involved in this case, right? As far as the DOJ is concerned.
Yeah, it seems like they were maybe, if what you're describing is accurate, or if I'm understanding it accurately, they were perhaps intentionally excluding certain people who fell outside of that window.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. Interesting.
Because then, when the NPA was signed, anybody outside of that, then yeah.
What, before we go, I wanted to ask you, why do you think Trump made this a major part of his campaign promise and is now backtracking? Like, did he think his followers or supporters would just be like, okay, presumably he knew the same information all along, so.
It's a great example of Trump's most powerful strength now exposing his greatest weakness, and that he instinctively knows his base. He knew his base would get revved up on the promise, or, sometimes he was dancing around the issue, but the implied promise that he would reveal all these documents. It was a big selling point when he went on all these podcasts last fall. He just totally understands the way that the mind works, especially among, I think, more like working class, non-New York Times reading voters who are just, listening to podcasts, thinking about conspiracies, wondering about this type of thing. He knew how to tap into their passions and emotions. And so he just took the kind of shortcut to revving them up to get an easy vote, easy political win last year by promising this and Kennedy stuff and UFOs. He knew that this was like the perfect mix for delivering for that type of voter. What he didn't realize is that he'd actually have to follow through on any of these promises. I think he didn't actually care about the substance. He just knew that this was the way to certain voters' hearts.
Yeah. Well, unlike this, he backtracked on Iran. He's broken all his promises.
On Medicaid, he promised explicitly not to cut Medicaid. Biggest Medicaid cut ever.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know. We need to do a show on that. It's going to be devastating for a lot of states.
Yeah, Kentucky. It's got a formula in there where if you kind of like expanded the most. Yeah. You received the most cuts, and
I'm in North Carolina, so I'm like.
Oh yeah, and then North Carolina has very deep cuts. The Kaiser Family Health Foundation has put some really interesting these graphics of which states hit the most. Yeah, North Carolina, Kentucky. Oh, it's going to be devastating.
Yeah, it is, and it's not just Donald Trump. To be clear,
of course.
All right, it is Republicans in general, and I need to.
Johnson took the House bill and then added more Medicaid cuts when the Senate bill got their version out. It's like this is mind-bending, just to pay for all these crazy tax cuts, and some of which maybe are justified, but then everything in politics is it's a you have to weigh the costs and the risks with the benefits, and the costs are going to be terrible.
They are. And, and I'm one of these people who I'm torn, because I do feel like medical expenses across the board are way too much. I do feel like there's a lot of fraud, and not just in illegal billing. I'm talking about, things costing more than they should, and the supply being artificially constricted, which is why, and we can talk about all of those things, but at the same time, at the end of the day, that doesn't actually matter to somebody who can't afford their medical bills, And
there's a lot to cut in healthcare.
Right.
You kind of lay them all out there.
Yeah.
And it's like, you look at the medical device companies, the specialty doctors, the hospitals, pharma, these kind of insurance networks, Medicare Advantage, which Wall Street Journal documented $50 billion in illegal billing last year in a story. It's like, you want to cut $50 billion in waste? The Wall Street Journal already documented how they do it.
Yep.
Like they could just do that. They don't, because the Medicare Advantage providers will destroy you. They hire so many lobbyists in Washington. Obama's former CMS director, all these former healthcare HHS directors all work for the Medicare Advantage companies now.
Yep.
So they know that the easiest way to cut is to just take poor folks in Appalachia and kick them off because they can't fight back.
It's true. And if you are in Appalachia, which I'm not, I'm in the Sandhills, but still, friends, just so you know, call your doctor. Ask them for the cash price. I do not have health insurance. I have not had health insurance for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
I have found that it's significantly easier. And if you are of moderate health, if you take care of your health, it's just cheaper. It's like crazy cheaper.
If I put in the bank what I pay in premiums and then co-pays all the time, like I would,
if you're not going to have a baby, which is like the biggest cost for women our age, right? And if you're healthy, like if you keep care of yourself, if you have, emergency, I don't know. I should probably write a thread on this too, but it's funny. I worked with a guy who actually worked in health billing, hospital billing. He's the one who convinced me, like, stop paying for your health insurance. Let me just show you how it goes. And do
that thread. I'll read that thread. I don't. I'm a little skeptical, but I'm open to being persuaded.
Well, I mean, it all depends on how you feel about these things. But as far as like, I pay as you go. I pay for my daughter's health insurance. I pay not for her health insurance. I pay for her medical visits, right? I pay out of pocket cash.
The problem is, like, if you get in a car accident or you get cancer or something like that, then you're screwed.
The problem is if you get cancer, not if you get in a car accident. But cancer, yes. But again, I have opinions on all of that as well. But yeah, I mean, again, like I said, 10 years I've been going, and I've been paying as I go, and I actually go to the doctor every 3 months. So it is. If you shop around, it is affordable. There are things, but I think the thing that this has actually radicalized me on this is that I have to hop through a bunch of hoops, and yet I can then negotiate the prices on everything all the way down, right? And this is not using Medicare, not using any private health insurance. This is just me negotiating with and knowing what to say and what to do. And that's what pisses me off so bad, because I'm like, it's an artificial market, which is what we are keeping afloat, right? As far as drugs go, as far as healthcare goes, as far as testing, labs, it's insane. But I've navigated it, and again, I don't know what most people can afford. I'll talk about it. I'll write a thread about what I have paid. And I'll be honest about the things I paid for, like lab tests, for blood tests, things like that. But at the end of the day, it has just come out significantly cheaper than what I would have paid if I had just had health insurance.
Oh.
Again, I haven't had any accidents. I haven't had any emergencies in 10 years. So, we'll see.
Might be a good time to get insurance then, because what if your luck runs out?
See, and that's what everyone says. Like, my mom is like breathing.
Maybe I'm insurance filled, but I just don't. I've had family members that have had unexpected youthful cancer, and so it's like, you never know. I don't know, but I think for savvy patients, what you're doing probably makes a lot of sense. If you're healthy and you're savvy
my ex-husband
and
is
aggressive,
a PA.
like you're willing to take the
so
matters
helps.
into your own hands. Most people are not, you know.
I'm too risk averse, so I can't do that.
My ex-husband is a PA,
it.
so I like run everything through him, and then he's like, "Yes, you need to attend," or "No, that's bullshit." Okay, so maybe a little bit of it's just me having access to a medical professional at all times. You know, I don't know, but a lot of it. But he's the same way as me. He's like super like combative against the military or the medical establishment, as you know, in the way that it's always trying to like bilk money out of patients. So I don't know, we'll see. I'll write a thread and I'll send it to you, Lee. I'll send it straight.
I'll probably see it in my timeline. I see your stuff.
All right. Well,
I like the bell content.
I've got to wrap it up over here. And we've got
yes.
significant thunderstorm.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Nice joining you guys.
Thank you so much for joining us, Lee. That was really fun. We'll have to go back.
I'm going to stop it and then let it load real quick. Okay.
Okay.